a wife like you with a low income who does part-time work is not a good wife. But your sister Julia, on the other, amazing and radiant unlike you. After all, she also earns 5,000 a month. She's also really beautiful, has and is gorgeous. There is a world of difference between your sister and you because you're a woman of charm altogether. So because of these reasons, it's not my fault that I cheated on you, Natalie. And it's all your fault that I'm away, and that's why I'm marrying my sister, okay? So go ahead and sign the divorce papers. What? Oh, don't you worry, I won't regret XXX.
I believe that I had a normal and ordinary happy marriage with my husband. But then I guess it can all fall easily like this, huh? I looked at my husband as he left the room while mocking me and thought to myself, how pathetic. But I wasn't thinking about how pathetic my husband was, because my husband would be the one lose everything from now on. My name is Natalie. I am married to my husband, Dylan, through a friend. And we are living ordinary life together as a couple. Although we were still young and going out with each other, we didn't have any kids. We were able to devote ourselves to each other's hobbies, friends, and other interests. I enjoy doing crafts and making little things, while Dylan prefers going out for drinks with his friends. So sometimes he and his friends will get together once a week to catch up over a few beers. One day, when Dylan came home from drinking with his friends, he looked a little dissatisfied, which was pretty unusual. While preparing water to sober him, called out to Dylan,
Oh, welcome home, honey. What's wrong? Why are you frowning?
Oh, well, I heard that a friend of mine is moving into a new place, and, that big tower apartment neighborhood, which has been completed recently. Well, he's moving into that apartment.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. We can't imagine what it would be like to live in a place like that. It must be really nice.
just like Dylan had said, the construction of the magnificent tower apartment that had been under construction in our neighborhood for several years had finally been completed. I was looking at the construction wondering what kind of rich people lived there, but I was surprised to find out that close to us would be living there.
Yeah, it's really hard to imagine.
Saying this, Dylan took the glass one gave him and chugged it in one go.
My friend's wife is supposedly self-made and makes a lot of money, which is why they are rich. But compared to that, I'm the only any money, so it is definitely not for us.
Oh, honey, please don't say it like that. I also work at a part-time job.
But that's not any different from a part that even students are doing. I'm sorry, but that doesn't count as work.
As my husband let out a huge sigh, he pushed the empty glass towards me.
But compared to that, Natalie, your Julia is amazing, isn't she? When we had dinner with Julia the other night, she was wearing really expensive, branded clothes, and she's such a beauty, attracting everyone around her. And plus, she also told me that her income is $5,000. Isn't that about 10 times more than earn with your petty job?
Dylan laughed and went into the bedroom, stumbling slightly due to his drunkenness from the alcohol. I let out a small sigh as I watched him disappear. Dylan looks down on me regularly, and I really hate it when he does that. Dylan works for a somewhat small LC business, and from what I hear, it's a very tough place to work because pay doesn't increase that much. I understand that, but that shouldn't make you look down on me. And recently, Dylan has been praising what my sister wears frequently. My elder sister, Julia, who is 3 years than me, also lives nearby where we. She's also the kind of person who goes out for drinks. So I knew that she would often go out with Dylan. Julia has always been popular since young. Julia, who is always stylish and beautiful, is pampered and spoiled by everyone around her and has a personality so different from anyone else is that it is hard to believe that she is real. Being with such a cheerful person, one Dylan and her must get along really. Two of them would often go out and bars to drink together.
I never thought that Julia and I were compared as sisters, even after I went to Dylan, and to think that my own was the one doing it.
Today, too, I felt really uneasy because Dylan had said that he was going to sleep. The next day, Dylan suddenly said something during breakfast with us.
Hey, Natalie, why don't we move?
You're talking about that big tower again? That's an option only for the rich. You know that, right? As my personal opinion, I think that a small house is just perfect for every family. Plus, I don't think we would really feel at home if it's too big like that apartment.
Well, that may be true, but if we think about getting older, it's not a bad idea to live in a place with security and move into a place that is just spotless and nice.
But if we move into a tower apartment, we want it. Be able to live the life we are currently living, right?
But hearing this, Dylan was still mumbling and complaining, as if he was still convinced by what I was saying. I guess he must be very jealous of his friend's success. Dylan has a habit of showing off what he has and who he knows, and to be envied by other people for having them. If we could, I would love to live in a nice place like that tower apartment. But even if Dylan and I were to double our income, we would still never be able to afford a luxurious place.
Well, I knew it would be difficult because I have a wife who doesn't eat enough.
He says this and looks down on me as ignores the fact that he himself ear income. So, as usual, I ignore what Dylan says and drink my soup.
All right, yeah, I guess I'll have to work a little harder too.
Dylan mumbled this to himself, his expression lightening a bit as he breakfasted. He must have thought of something idea, but it's not like you can move that tower apartment right away. I thought so to myself and did not him what he was thinking, but I was confronted with a shocking fact. It must have been about a month after that breakfast together. On that day, Dylan didn't let me join his drinking session with his friend, which was unusual for him, and he came back in the morning, hearing a taxi stop near our place to the front door.
Hey, Dylan. When you'd get home late, you would call me in advance. So why didn't you wrong? You had me really worried.
When I opened the front door, I saw not only Dylan, but also Julia. Both Dylan and Julia looked perfect as the sun was coming up, as it was still early in the morning. They must have just been drinking, judging from the way the smell of alcohol drifted through the air as they passed by Julia and Dylan and I. But no matter how much they both drank, this was the first time they continued drinking until morning. While I was being stunned, both Dylan and Julia pushed me out and stormed into the house.
Natalie, I need to talk to you. Come over here.
I did as I was told, and I sat around the table as the two sat down before me. Both Dylan and Julia was too drunk, thought it'd be just a huge hassle against them.
Okay, I'm gonna just be straight with you. I am divorcing you.
What? Is that a joke?
I asked with a laugh, but then Jewel, her mouth as she laughed at me contemptuously.
Oh, I'm sorry, Natalie. Actually, it's something I've been about for a while now. It seems like you and Dylan seem to completely different worlds. Dylan is much more suited to a woman.
Julia said this as she hugged Dylan's arm right in front of me. To this, Dylan looked really happy. I just couldn't believe what I saw from early in the morning. I let out a huge sigh, feeling relieved that it wasn't real.
What do you mean by what is the meaning of this? All you've been doing is just making pocket money and acting almighty while calling that your job work when it isn't, since it's only... And I just couldn't take it anymore.
Oh, I heard everything from Dylan, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills, Nash Young. When Dylan said he wanted to live in a tower apartment, you told him it was impossible. You can't trust what your husband is for, which shows that you're not a for him.
The two of them were laughing, happily saying such things to me in a really friendly manner.
Unlike you, your sister had suggested respecting the rules. She told me that I would make a great tenant for that apartment. Like that, she agrees with what I say, and she's a nice woman compared to you.
I was just saying what the reality is. Both of you are just too drunk to make any good decisions. Just praising or complimenting someone easily won't make any difference.
You have always had a poor mindset. We're always so frugal. So it's no people around you will be poor too. Do you even know how much Dylan really loves you?
Julia says that as she glares at me.
He earns about $7,000 per month.
How could I not know about Dylan's XX? He doesn't even make that much money at all. When I looked at Dylan, he awkwardly averted his eyes from me. I guess he must have lied to Julia about getting excited while they were talking and getting drunk together. So his usual habit of trying to look out for others had kicked in.
Anyway, Julia earns a lot more mo you, Natalie, and she also agrees, stands up for me. It's no doubt that she's a better dancer than you, Natalie. So that's why I'm divorcing you.
Dylan then brought the divorce papers to his room. I didn't know how long he had been working on the divorce papers, but the only thing that was blank was where I had to sign.
Hey, why don't you reconsider this thing one more time? It's not something you can decide on a whim, just because. You're Dylan. You're not being logical about this. And Julia, do you really think that your mother would forgive you for taking my husband?
I couldn't care less about what father and mother would think about this. Because a wonderful man like Dylan for who I am. So I don't need anything else.
Hearing this, Dylan was also nodding next to me. If anyone heard what they were both saying, it was clear that Dylan was only after the money. Knowing that Dylan and Julia was in situation, there would be not point to persuade them any longer, no matter much I tried. Besides, there was no way I could persuade them, seeing as they liked each other so much. Dylan had always looked down on me. It was about earning money or just Elsent, general, and having him request for a divorce, I was actually beginning to feel relieved.
Fine, we'll get a divorce, but I don't want to regret anything, okay?
I signed the divorce papers as soon as they were ready, and the two of them rushed me to the city office immediately. They called a taxi for me and made the divorce papers right away. After witnessing that I had submitted divorce papers, both Julia and Dylan officially got married a few weeks after. The two were so well prepared for that. I also left the house, leaving Dylan and Julia, who seemed to be enjoying the view in front of my eyes. And right after I left, they went to room in that tower apartment on the total cost of buying a room in the apartment was around $2 million. When I first heard the amount, my blank, and I really couldn't process amount in my head.
Julia and I will be moving out next week, so I give this house back to you. Looking back on it now, it's such a shabby house.
Dylan described mercilessly about the place where they lived together since they got married. Dylan wanted to make himself look cool by putting someone else down, but he didn't know what he was doing.
See, well then I wish you both all the...
And that was the last time Dylan and I had talked with each other. On the day Dylan had moved out, he left without even saying goodbye. And since then, few days passed. The house was a little bigger now that they had both moved out, but it was just right for living alone. I was finally free, able to stretch my wings comfortably for the first time in a long while. Then suddenly, the doorbell rang loudly. When I saw through the peephole, I right outside, and he looked really...
What the hell is wrong with that woman? Everything she told is a lie?
Dylan sat down on the couch.
Oh, so you must have finally realized who Julia really is, huh?
While Dylan was sitting on the front porch, he explained to Julia who she really was through the door. Well, to begin with, Julia doesn't even earn 5,000 per month. Actually, she doesn't even work full time, and like me, she makes her living by part-time jobs. Nevertheless, the reason why she was able to afford such expensive clothing or have expensive branded goods was because Julia's parents were paying everything for her. I knew that there were several men that for Julia, but I knew that once got married, all of them would stop that. And besides, Julia knew how to spend money and couldn't be frugal with it at all. In terms of the money her previous boyfriends gave her, she probably earned around 10,000 per month. But at the end of the month, since she would spend it all, she would have zero in savings, which would mean she would have to ask Dylan out for drinks so he could pay for her food expenses. And above all, she was also devoted to gambling. As a result, she was in debt. But she did gambling so that she could just splurge lavishly on shopping. The amount of money she had to pay back in debt was around 5,000 per month. In other words, Julia's debt was then the rent of the house where Dee had lived. In the end, Dylan abandoned me and be with Julia, who was in had a habit of spending the money at. So, of course, there was no way that he could afford to live such a rich life he had dreamed and planned for himself. He got together with Julia.
That woman, she's lying about everything. She's just scamming me, isn't she?
Well, you were also lying and prevaricating, weren't you, Julia? So you shouldn't be even saying that. You both did that to yourselves.
The fact that the two of them were both trying to make each other look good about the truth was completely ridiculous. Dylan was talking as if he was but he had not right to talk that way. What he did was the same thing.
Why didn't you tell me about it in the first place? You were my wife.
Well, I'm not nice enough to give you advice after you look down on me. Because like what you and Julia said, it seems like I'm not really qualified to be a wife, right?
After Dylan had heard what I had to understood everything and began cry.
I'm so sorry, Natalie. I was completely wrong. I beg you, please just start over. If I continue to stay with that woman, I'll be ruined too.
It's too late to regret it now. I will never, ever get back together, you. So, can you please leave now? If you make a scene here, everyone will see what you're doing, and it'll be gossiped in no time, okay? Since you want others to see you as a good person, that's how you want to be seen, right?
Dylan seemed to have been at the dock while, but before I knew it, he left house. He hates more than anything being seen as a failure by the people he knows or has met. I felt just a little sorry for him, that he would have a much more miserable future. It seems like Dylan stayed at the apartment for only a few days, and then he sold the room. But since a large amount of debt were the tower apartment, he will have off bit by bit from now on. Julia and Dylan are currently renting an apartment that they're living in, but it's a small apartment for two people to live in, which seems to cause them to constantly fight each other. Everything is coming out about Dylan W., including the fact that his divorce from me was due to an affair and that he also had to pay me for what he had done. The remaining debt for the tower apartment and the rent and the alimony. Naturally, it's not something that Dylan really has a low monthly salary, car payment, which is why he also began taking on part-time jobs and other different sources of income, so that he could pay off what he had borrowed. As for Julia, who is living with Dylan, must have seen how frugal they both are. But it seems like she bought tons of clothes at a local clothing store that day. It seems that her spending habits are still very much alive and probably very hard to get rid of. By seeing Julia being like that, it to imagine when she will be able to her debts. It looks like Julia tried to run away from home a few times, but father caught her because I had already reported the outrageous incident to him. Even I can no longer see Julia as my own elder sister. Compared to Dylan and Julia, my life become a little easier, all thanks alimony. Plus, the manager of my part-time job asked me if I wanted to become a full-time employee. My manager said that they had just let go of their full-time employee and wouldn't be interested. I agreed to the offer right away. Thanks to this, I was able to earn money to live a comfortable life. I lived alone. So, in the end, I probably made more money than Dylan. Well, guess I'll just treat myself to a nice little dinner tonight. Thinking that I would return to my house while looking at the big tower apartment which is standing in the distance. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you in our next video.